This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
The views and opinions shared on this program are that of Louie Tee and In the Lab Room alone and should be taken exactly as they are given. If you are soft, easily offended, or can't listen to the criticism of your team, this program is not intended for you. This is pure, unadulterated football talk for the hardcore fan. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program, 2014 NFL Lab Reports. Today we're talking about the Detroit Lions. Let's get started. 2014 Lab Reports, Detroit Lions. Looking at the strengths of this Detroit Lions football team, you know what's funny? Is there was a common misconception about this Detroit Lions team, and I will be the first to tell you that I perpetuated that misconception that this team was undisciplined. But in fact, if you look at the penalty numbers, they were the direct opposite. Here's a team that actually was at the bottom in terms of penalties and yardage defensively, and offensively they weren't that bad either. And so here's a team that we assumed, because of Jim Schwartz and his wild nature on the sidelines and him always going berserk, and yeah, we blow the Ndamukong Suh things out of proportion, and we talk about how he's undisciplined as a player. And yeah, this team have their moments where they lose control and it can cost them ball games. And I think the bigger issue is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, and that's the turnovers. But the penalties, I think we blew that out of proportion, and I know I did. I can't even sit here and act as if I was on the right side of the fence on this one. I was one of the main ones. I was in the front of the line, and I got in every single line that involved bashing Jim Schwartz and this Detroit Lions football team. I got in the front of every line. And the line that said that this Lions football team was undisciplined, I was at the very front of that line. My mouth was the loudest, and I talked the longest about that. I was wrong from a statistical standpoint, but if you watch the games, it just seemed like this team was undisciplined. But penalties, yardage, and the number of penalties was a strength for this Detroit Lions team, one that they need to continue to build upon in 2014. You move on to another strength. This passing game, and heavens to Megatron, where would this team be without the passing game and Calvin Johnson? He's a one-of-a-kind specimen, the likes of which this league has never seen before, probably will never see again. Now, you know what? I can't say that they'll never see one like him again, because I'll tell you what, the athletes aren't getting any smaller, that's for sure. You know, receivers are getting even bigger and faster and stronger, but he's the first of his kind that we've ever seen. That size, that big, that strong, that physical, that fast. I don't know if we'll ever see that combination like that put together that way again. You know, 6'5", 240, 235, and running a sub 4.40. I don't know if we'll ever see that again, but we'll probably see some guys come along and try to challenge what he was able to put forth in the league. But when it's all said and done, he's going to be a Hall of Famer if he continues to play at the pace and level that he's been playing at. And his passing game is elite, because he is an elite receiver and Matthew Stafford can deliver him the football. If there's more help in Detroit, I think this passing offense can take it to that next level, especially with Jim Caldwell now pulling the strings with this offense. And so the passing game is definitely something that's a strength. Matthew Stafford, when healthy, and he's been healthy the last few years, throws for over 4,000 yards, and they're annually pushing the envelope to get to 5,000. This pass offense is one of the best. They convert on third downs. Speaking of which, that takes us right to our next strength, and it's a perfect segue. This Detroit Lions team was among the best in the league on third downs and time of possession, and those two go hand in hand. If you convert on third downs, you're holding on to the football, and if you're holding on to the football, you're dominating time of possession. Lions were 5th best in the league on third downs with a 43% conversion rate on third downs, and add to the fact that with the time of possession, they were 4th best in the league in terms of time of possession. And so you're controlling the pace of the game, you're eating up the clock, and you're getting into an offensive rhythm and taking the other team out of an offensive rhythm when you can hold on to the football. Lions did a really good job of controlling time of possession and converting on third downs. And again, those two go hand in hand. If you convert on third down, you will control the pace of the game and dominate time of possession. You look at another strength for this team, and it's funny because a team that record-wise was one that just missed the postseason, you would think that they made the postseason with all of these strengths, but they somehow found a way to miss the postseason, and that's kind of why Jim Schwartz had to go. This team is too talented and seems to have too many things going in their favor for them to actually end up not making the postseason, but that's what actually happened in Detroit. And another strength is that they protected Matthew Stafford, and it's part protection. The other part is him getting rid of the football, not holding on to it. And it always helps when you've got a guy like Calvin Johnson out at receiver, where if all else fails, I can just chuck it up to 81 and hope that he comes down with it. And even if he doesn't, at least he won't let someone else come down with the football. So it always helps when you've got a guy like that out wide that you can just throw it up to. But it also helps when the offensive line does their job and the quarterback does his by getting rid of the football. Lions gave up 23 sacks last year. That was the second fewest in the National Football League, of course, behind the Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. So they did a great job of keeping their quarterback off the ground and not giving up yardage via sacks a season ago. That's something, and all of these strengths are things that they want to carry into 2014 to try to get back to where they were in 2011 when this team won 10 games and made it to the postseason. So you go from these strengths to the weaknesses of the Detroit Lions. So we go on to the weaknesses for this Detroit Lions football team, and you start right at the top. Turnover differential. When you turn it over at the rate the Detroit Lions did a season ago, and you finish with a turnover ratio of -12, then you already know what this is. You already know what that means for your season. Just think, the Lions finished at 7-9 last season, and had this division literally in the palm of their hands before they imploded at the end of the season. Just think, being -12 in the turnover ratio. Had this team just been -6, they probably go to the postseason. That's how talented this team is. They were -12 and were 2 games away from making it to the postseason. And really, had they just found a way to play competent football down the stretch, they make it to the postseason. But because they could not get out of their own way and stop turning over the football, they missed the postseason. Gotta stop turning the football over again. Turnovers, they rule this league. If you can win the turnover battle, your chances of winning the game increase exponentially. You turn it over, and you'll find an easy route to losing football games. Simple as that. You go on to another weakness of this Detroit Lions football team. Lack of explosive runs. Here's a team that features Reginald Bush as their running back, yet no runs of 40 yards or more. So They had big play runs. Those are the ones over 20 yards, 20 to 39 yards. But those explosive runs, those were hard to come by. In fact, those were non-existent in Detroit last season, as they had a big bagel, a big donut, 0 runs of 40 yards or more, which is unexcusable when Reggie Bush is your running back. But they were one of 4 teams in the entire National Football League to not post a run of 40 yards or more. That's something that needs to change again. And it kind of goes hand in hand again. I talked about this with the San Diego Chargers. These things go hand in hand. Lack of explosiveness and time of possession. If you're a team that strikes quickly, you're not going to dominate time of possession. If you strike quickly, if you're an explosive and very dynamic offense, you're not holding on to the ball for a 14-play, 92-yard drive that eats up 9 minutes and 7 seconds of the clock. No, that's not what you're doing. If you have a 4-play, 78-yard drive that includes a 58-yard run or a 58-yard touchdown strike, that's a 2-minute and 17-second drive. So those two don't go hand in hand, explosiveness and time of possession. The Lions chose to go with time of possession, so they didn't get any big explosive runs of over 40 yards. That needs to change because it's hard in this league to score consistently when you're posting 13 and 12 and 14 play drives. You need to be able to score on a 5 or 6 play drive, on a 3 play drive, on a 2 play drive. Those are fun. Those are explosive. Those help you win ball games. Another weakness of this football team: fumble Rooski. This is a team that had butterfingers last year. They could not find a way to hold on to the football. 3rd most fumbles in the league and 2nd most fumbles lost in the league with 15. You cannot live that way in this league. And again, if you're going to turn it over, you're going to lose football games. And I talked about the turnover differential. This fumble total kind of helps you see how they ended up with a negative 12 turnover ratio. And you can't have those type of things rear its ugly head if you're trying to win in this league on a consistent basis. So you move from that weakness to another weakness. And this is a huge one. Where the sacks at? Where are the sacks in Detroit? You spend all these first-round selections on all of these defenders, and Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley. Where are all of the sacks? Ezekiel, Ziggy Ansah. Where are the sacks? Where they at? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Now, the rookie Ziggy Ansah did his part. He went and got 8.5 sacks, 8 sacks last season. He went and got sacks. And in his rookie year, to come in and do that in the rookie season, that's impressive. And the guy is extremely raw. So for him to come in, be raw, and pick up the NFL speed of the game and learn how to get to the quarterback, that was impressive. Where's everybody else at? Where's Ndamukong Suh? Where's Nick Fairley? Where's Young? Where's the rest of the guys that were supposed to be able to get to the quarterback? You struggled getting to the quarterback. Only 33 sacks last season. And that was good for 3rd worst in the league. And I'm here to tell you, if you can't get to the opposing team's quarterback, you're going to be in for a long day at the office. So this Detroit Lions team needs to tighten up getting to the other team's quarterback. You want to give it up in the passing game? The easiest way to do so is to not get after the other team's quarterback. So you go from those weaknesses to camp battles in the Motor City. So as you can see behind me, I've got the assistance of my big board, and I'll be using him to break down these camp battles as well as the experiment for this Detroit Lions football team. We jump into the camp battles, and right away you go straight to the quarterback position. Of course, Matthew Stafford is the unquestioned starter in Detroit, but behind him, a lot of question marks. Really, I think it's Dan Orlovsky's job to lose. However, it's Dan Orlovsky battling Kellen Moore for the backup quarterback position. I do not think the Lions want to keep 3 quarterbacks. And really, I don't see the sense in doing that. Now, there is logic behind keeping 3 quarterbacks. There is an injury history with Matthew Stafford, but Matthew Stafford has stayed relatively healthy over the last 3 seasons or so. So if I'm the Detroit Lions, I feel like Dan Orlovsky is a veteran, been in this league. That's the guy you would probably more so trust than a young guy like Kellen Moore to come in and try to stable the ship until Matthew Stafford is able to come back if he were to get injured. I'm like, this is the way I feel. I don't care how long you've been in the league, and I'm all about having veteran backups and so forth and so forth, but I want the guy that's going to perform the best. And if Kellen Moore can outshine Dan Orlovsky in the preseason, why not give the young fella a chance? Now, Kellen Moore is a guy that I feel like is a soft tosser, doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but if he can be extremely accurate with the football, and that's what I want to see from him in the preseason, threw a beautiful ball in the Detroit Lions' first preseason game against Cleveland and was the only touchdown in the game, ended up being a game winner. That's what you want to see from Kellen Moore. That's what made him a winner at Boise State and got him drafted by this Detroit Lions football team. If he can come in and play consistent football, show that he has a command of this offense, and outperform Dan Orlovsky, he might be able to stick onto this roster, because I don't see the need for 3 quarterbacks on this roster. I think they're ultimately going to keep 3, but I don't see the need for it. I would love to see them keep 2, free up a roster spot and spend that somewhere else. I think Dan Orlovsky is going to win that job when it's all said and done. In this league, veteran backups are valued more than the young quarterbacks that you can stash away on the practice squad, or even in this case, might even keep him on the roster and just continue to allow him to be groomed, because I don't know if they feel comfortable sliding him through waivers and seeing if they can stash him onto the practice squad. Somebody else might try to snatch him up. So we'll see. That's an interesting dynamic. Not just the positional battle itself, but how the Lions go about handling it. Do they just keep 2? Do they keep 3? Are they afraid of losing him? And that being Kellen Moore, we'll see. But you move on from there to right tackle. And this is the only offensive line position that is up for grabs along that starting front. And that's right tackle with Adrian Waddle and Corey Hilliard. Corey Hilliard, to me, is a backup. He's a guy that you like for depth purposes. You don't necessarily want him starting. Adrian Waddle was a guy that last year got some starts for you. So did Corey Hilliard. Waddle, to me, has a bigger upside. He's a younger guy. So I feel like just continue working with him. Give him the opportunity to start. If he continues, because neither one of these guys have separated themselves in camp. I think if all things are equal, let Adrian Waddle continue to start. He started last year. Let him continue to start and let him continue to grow and mature at that position. If not, if he doesn't show you what you're looking for, then you can always fall back with Corey Hilliard. But I don't think you want to take the young man out and then try to reinsert him. Leave him there. Let him learn. Let him continue to grow and see if you have something at the right tackle position. I think that's the thinking of the Lions as well. If he doesn't perform or he gets injured, then Corey Hilliard could slide in there. But right now, I think if all things are equal and even, which they are right now as we currently talk about this team, then I think Adrian Waddle is the guy that needs to continue to be the starter at right tackle. You move on to the running back / fullback positions for this Detroit Lions football team and how they're going to address this position. You look at this group, Reginald Bush, he's going to be on this roster. Joique Bell going to be on this roster, and I'm glad the Detroit Lions re-signed him. I thought you were going to be foolish for a second and allow him to test free agency. You were smart. You took care of him, brought him back. I think he's an integral part of your running game, and he catches it out of the backfield. I like Joique Bell. I think he's a very versatile back, and I'm glad you brought him back. Theo Riddick, another guy that can catch it out of the backfield. I think he's going to be on this roster as well. That's where the locks stop for me. Can't speak for this organization, but I'd like to think that those 3 are going to make the roster. Mikel LaShore is an interesting prospect because here's a kid that had a really good season about 2 years ago. Showed flashes and dealt with injuries early on in his career, couldn't stay on the field. Then he finally was healthy, showed us why this Lions team invested a pick in him, and then he went back to being obscure last season. So I don't know if he's going to be on this roster or not. It's a new regime, so he might get a second lease on life in Detroit, or they just might say, hey, we've seen enough, time to cut our losses here and move forward. The thing that might free up a roster spot for him, or the thing that could be potentially a death sentence for him on this roster, is this guy right here, Montel Owens. Now, Jett Collins is a fullback that I think the Lions are going to keep around to primarily fill that fullback role. Montel Owens, however, is an interesting guy because he's got running back capabilities as well as fullback capabilities. Now, in Jacksonville, he was more of a running back, but he has played fullback in his career before, briefly. So he has some versatility that could make a guy like Mikel LaShore very expendable. We will see. And another guy to look at is Chad Abram. He's an undrafted rookie free agent out of Florida State. He's a big bruising fullback that will lower the boom on guys. And so he's another guy to look out for. I think he's going to end up being on the practice squad, however. But don't be surprised if Montel Owens also makes this roster. If he does, Mikel LaShore could be looking from the outside in. We will see, because they could keep all 6 of those guys, Bush, Bell, Riddick, LaShore, Collins, and Owens. But I don't think you need to keep Owens and LaShore, because you don't need to keep 2 fullbacks unless you're keeping 3 running backs. And that Montel Owens would serve as a 4th running back if need be. There's no need to keep both 4 running backs and 2 fullbacks. It's no need for that. So that is how I think that situation will shake out. You move on to wide receiver, and this is an interesting group here, one that I like because I think they're starting to grow this position the way that they need to. You've got a star in Calvin Johnson, and you need to put pieces around him. And so you look at this, Calvin Johnson, Heavens, the Megatron, Golden Tate, Jeremy Ross, Ryan Broyles, Chris Durham, TJ Jones, Kevin Ogletree, more Ogletree, please, and Corey Fuller, your draft pick, I think in the 6th round last year out of Virginia Tech. So now, running through this very quickly, Calvin Johnson, lock. Golden Tate, free agent acquisition from Seattle, lock. Jeremy Ross, interesting because he's a guy that showed you last season that he has value on this roster as a returns man. Also, he can play receiver and catch the football. I think that versatility and his ability to field punts and kickoffs might be his saving grace on this roster. However, there is some competition to his roster spot. Ryan Broyles, a guy that is extremely talented out of Oklahoma, dealing with knee injuries. He's finally healthy. If he can just stay healthy, he's been tearing ACLs left and right. If he can just steer clear of the injuries, Ryan Broyles is an absolute realistic option at receiver on this football team. One that I think could easily slide onto this roster. And he's had a strong camp thus far, so he's someone to look out for. Chris Durham has been a solid receiver for you, but I think his time might be up with this new regime. If you still had the same coaching staff intact in Detroit, I think Chris Durham might be safe. But because this is a new regime, they're bringing in their stuff, he might not be a guy that hangs around, because what he has done in the past isn't held in high regard by this new coaching staff. It means absolutely nothing to them. What they want to see is him producing for them throughout camp and in the preseason. And to tell you the truth, he has been one of the guys that hasn't been getting a lot of reps with this offense in camp. So he could easily be a guy that does not make this team. TJ Jones, a kid you drafted out of Notre Dame, a lot of potential. He could easily end up on the practice squad if he were not to make this roster. Want to see how he is able to acclimate himself to the NFL speed and the game and running routes and kind of getting better at his craft. We'll see if he's able to crack this roster. Kevin Ogletree, more Ogletree, please, is a guy that the Lions want to see more of. And he's been performing very well in camp. He came onto this roster last season, during the season, and I think he's a guy that could easily end up on this roster, much like Ryan Broyles. Look, there's no space on this roster for both or for all three of these guys, being Ross, Broyles, and Ogletree. Maybe 2 out of the 3, but not all 3. So if Ogletree is able to outshine Ross and Broyles, I think that would spell trouble for a guy like Broyles, because Ross brings something to the table that Broyles nor Ogletree brings to the table, and that's return ability. And so I think it would be a competition between Broyles and Ogletree to make this roster if both of those guys continue to play the way they've played throughout training camp and into the preseason. And Corey Fuller is a young, interesting prospect out of Virginia Tech. Was on the practice squad last year, could easily be back on the practice squad again if he continues to mature and shows the ability that landed him on this team as a draft pick last year. He might actually make this roster. So there is a lot of competition at receiver. I think they're ultimately going to keep 6 receivers, 1, 2 being Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson. I see them keeping Jeremy Ross as a return man and a receiver. That's 3. I think Broyles could go on, or he could make this roster. I'm up in the air between him and Ogletree being that 4th guy. I think that they invested a pick in TJ Jones. They want him to be around. And I think Corey Fuller is a guy that might be ready to get an opportunity to be on this roster on Sundays. And so it'll be interesting to see what 6 make it out of this group. That is for certain. You move on to the linebacker position. And right now it looks like they want to keep 5 linebackers in Detroit. I'm never comfortable. I don't care if you play a 3-4, a 4-3. I'm never comfortable keeping less than 6 linebackers. I'm just not. And I'm hearing that this Lions team actually might be employing a 4-4 linebacker front, where you're looking at 4 defensive linemen and 4 linebackers behind them. If that is in fact the case, and look, they might not be employing that enough for it to be a base defense per se. I think the 4-3 is still going to be their base. But if you're running a 4-4, enough to where you need to have 4 guys that are competent enough to be on the field, then I feel like you need 6 linebackers. So 6, I think, is realistic. I'm just not comfortable with 5. And so that's why I think it's important to not keep 3 quarterbacks, so that you can add an extra linebacker or an extra safety or extra corner, wherever you feel that is a need for an extra body. I feel like not having 3 quarterbacks, if you don't need to, allows you the flexibility to do that. And here's a position that needs an extra body. DeAndre Levy, Stephen Tulloch, Kyle Van Noy, Ashley Palmer, Tahir Whitehead, Travis Lewis, and Julian Stanford are all candidates to make this roster. Now, DeAndre Levy, Stephen Tulloch, Kyle Van Noy, and Ashley Palmer are locks to make this roster. No doubt about it. In fact, Kyle Van Noy and Ashley Palmer are entrenched in a battle to start at outside linebacker. You assume that the Lions traded up to get Kyle Van Noy, that he was just going to be the anointed starter, but Ashley Palmer has come in, played some really good football throughout camp, and I'm hearing that there's a sizable distance between Palmer starting and Kyle Van Noy trailing. And so either way, they're both going to play a lot of snaps, and both are going to be on this roster. Tahir Whitehead is a guy that you drafted about 2 seasons ago or last year. Either way, I expect him to remain on this roster as well. Here's where your issue is. Travis Lewis and Julian Stanford. Right now, both are assumed to be on the outside looking in, but I feel like you got to keep 6. If you keep 5, neither one of them are making the roster. If you keep 6, then I think Travis Lewis and his ability to play special teams is going to win him out a roster spot between he and Julian Stanford, a guy that had some starting experience in Jacksonville and also can play special teams and played for you last year. But I just feel like Travis Lewis and his ability to stand out on special teams would be the difference maker in him making this roster. I think you need to keep 6 linebackers when it's all said and done. You go to cornerback. Here's a position that I feel like the Lions have to be better at. And I didn't think they played that bad last year necessarily against the pass, but they had their moments where they struggled. 7 corners for 6 or maybe even 5 roster spots. I talked about that backup quarterback situation and how that could affect the roster. Here's one of those positions that could get a roster spot shaved off of it if this organization feels that they need another roster spot dedicated somewhere else. So keep an eye on the cornerback position. Darius Slay, Rashawn Mathis, Bill Bentley, Nevin Lawson, Cassius Vaughn, Chris Greenwood, and Jonte Green. Now, Darius Slay, Rasheem Mathis, and Nevin Lawson are all making this roster, and I guess you could throw Bill Bentley in there. I really don't like Bill Bentley. I don't feel like he's that good of a corner, but I don't know if the Lions are ready to necessarily give up on Bill Bentley. So I think he's going to make this roster as well. But I'm hearing a guy like Jonte Green is actually performing better than Bill Bentley in camp. Yet Bill Bentley, when the unofficial depth charts were released, was higher on the depth chart than Jonte Green. So we'll see. It's just, again, Bill Bentley has potential, but how long are you going to allow that potential to continue to be potential before it actually manifests itself into talent on the field? If it doesn't mature into something else, then you got to at some point say, all right, enough's enough. So essentially, I think right now you're going to keep 6 corners. I think that is the smart thing to do. And it's a situation where I said that these 4, Slay, Mathis, Bentley, and Lawson, are all going to make this roster. So now you're looking at a 3-for-2 scenario where Cassius Vaughn, a veteran that's been around the block a few times, Indianapolis Colts and other places, can come in, compete along with Chris Greenwood and Jonte Green. Chris Greenwood has been on this roster for a while, been hanging around. Don't know if he's going to be able to maintain a roster spot. Jonte Green is a guy that helps you on special teams, and I'm thinking he's playing a little bit of competent corner as well. We'll see. I think Cassius Vaughn is a guy that you bring in, and he's familiar with the coaching staff. So I think that he's a guy that you want on this roster. I think he's a guy that will make this roster. And Jonte Green is another guy that I think, if he continues to play at the level that he's playing at, could make this roster. Chris Greenwood has been on this roster, so could easily see him maintaining a roster spot. It'll be interesting to see how the Lions kind of sort that cornerback situation out and figure out which 6 players are the best 6 players for this football team. You move on to safety, and I think there's 1 roster spot available at the safety position. I think 3 of them are already pretty much etched in stone. Then there's 1 final roster spot. And I think it's between Issa Abdul-Quaidus, Dijon Gomes, and Don Carey. Don Carey has been terrible in camp, has been beaten numerous times. Pretty safe to say that I don't think he's really in this discussion anymore. I think it's a 2-man race between Issa Abdul-Quaidus and Dijon Gomes. You went out and got Issa Abdul-Quaidus from the New Orleans Saints. He started there at one point for the Saints, and I think that he is the most viable option of this group. There's more upside. I think he's more athletic, and thus I think he's going to end up winning that final roster spot in Detroit at the safety position. And one of those cliff notes that you throw out there, there's a battle at kicker, Nate Freese versus Giorgio Tavecchio. And Nate Freese, neither one of these kickers have knocked anyone's socks off. They've wowed no one. And so Nate Freese by default will win this competition if things continue the way that they are. If somehow Giorgio Tavecchio can find a way to step his game up and take it to another level and exceed what Nate Freese is putting on the field, then he can win this job. It's wide open, but I think Nate Freese is ultimately going to end up being your kicker in Detroit. And so you go from those camp battles over to the experiment, which I have dubbed Roar, Lions, Roar. So we jump right into the experiment with the research question. With Jim Caldwell as the new head man in Detroit, Can the Lions recapture the magic of 2011 when the Lions made the postseason for the first time since 1999? Big question. Can Jim Caldwell come in, get this offense to play even better, limit the turnovers, accentuate the strengths of this offense, get Reggie Bush the football out in space, turn this offense from a really good offense into a great offense, all the while Terrell Austin coming over and making this defense legit? Can it happen? We will see. Hypothesis. If Jim Caldwell has an immediate impact on this offense and team in general, and Terrell Austin can take this defense to a new level, then the Detroit Lions can compete in the explosive NFC North. This is by far, in a way, one of the most explosive divisions in all of football. Detroit can score with the best of them. Chicago can score with the best of them. And we know about Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers and what they can put forth offensively when they're clicking on all cylinders. So this is a division where you've either got to do one of two things, if not both. You've either got to play some extremely good defense, or you've got to be explosive on offense and outscore teams. One or the other. You've got to do one or the other or both. If you're the Detroit Lions, you want to do a little bit of both. You want this offense to soar to new heights and get back to where Matthew Stafford was throwing for over 5,000 yards and spreading the football around. And you got the tight ends to do it now, and you got more threats at receiver now. You got Reggie Bush. Joyke Bell is back in the mix. You've got weapons. You've got weapons everywhere. Use them. If you're on the defensive side of the football, Terrell Austin coming over from Baltimore, now you want to see him take this defense to the next. Look, you got to get sacks. You got to get after the quarterback. You've got to be more disruptive on the defensive side of football. That's why you brought Terrell Austin here. You're hoping he's going to bring a little bit of that Ravens flavor to Detroit and help you turn things around defensively and get after some teams and force more turnovers and turn that turnover differential around. And so all of those things are going to be vital to the success of this Lions team in 2014. You move on to materials needed. Caldwell-Stafford connection. And it's funny because everyone has pretty much made a big deal out of Matthew Stafford's turnovers and said that he needs to be revamped as a quarterback. And one of the first things Jim Caldwell said when he got the job in Detroit is that Matthew Stafford doesn't need to be reworked or rewired or revamped. He just needs to take his game to another level, and that's why I'm here. It's not a situation where I'm going to come in and have him tweak his footwork or have him throwing from less slot angles. None of that stuff. I'm not coming in to try to change this guy as a quarterback. I just want to make him better. And everybody is on board with that. So this needs to be a happy marriage. We saw what Jim Caldwell was able to do in Baltimore for Joe Flacco. He took Joe Flacco from a fledgling quarterback to a Super Bowl winner in a matter of months. When they fired Cam Cameron in Baltimore and promoted him to the offensive coordinator, Joe Flacco took off. That team took off. They won the Super Bowl. Remember? 11 touchdowns, no interceptions in the postseason? Jim Caldwell was a huge part of that happening. And the rest of the league took notice. That's why he's your head coach, because they're looking for him to have that same type of impact on Matthew Stafford. And this connection needs to be a big one in Detroit. Heavens to Megatron! You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. He's an explosive and dynamic and one-of-a-kind athlete, the likes of which this league has never seen. His success is predicated on the offensive line doing their job, Matthew Stafford doing his job, which they've done. Both offensive line and Matthew Stafford have done their jobs, and him staying relatively healthy. We saw that 1 year, 2 years ago with the drops and the broken fingers or what have you. He can stay relatively healthy. He's one of the most problematic receivers, if not the most problematic receiver in the National Football League. There's some guys up there with him, the AJ Young, Fresh and Green, AJ Green, and a few others that come to mind. Des Bryant seems like he's ready to explode as one of the premier receivers in this league. There are a lot of specimens. If Josh Gordon isn't suspended, he's up there on that list. But to me, Megatron is in a different stratosphere because of what he brings to the table in terms of size, speed, and the ability to high point the football. I've seen this guy catch in quadruple coverage. I've never seen another guy do that before. You know, you see guys go up in double coverage, come down. I saw this guy go up in quadruple coverage against the Cowboys in the back of the end zone. I'm not saying. I'm just saying, if he's playing at a high level, which I expect him to, that opens up avenues for all of these other guys. Because some of these guys can't win one-on-one matchups. So they need help. And if you're paying attention to Megatron and double teaming him, it's going to open up the running game. It's going to be 7 in the box consistently, which it already is because you got to pay attention to Calvin Johnson. And now it's going to open up avenues for Golden Tate, some of these other guys at the receiver position, whether it's Ogletree or it's Broyles or the tight end position with Ebron and all the guys that you have there, Pettigrew. Look, if Calvin Johnson is getting off, sky's the limit for this offense. Because if you've got to worry about him and you got to put 2 guys on him at all times, everybody else is getting one-on-one matchups across the board. Can't double team everybody. So, heavens to Megatron. Success of this offense in terms of it going to a new level hinges upon Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson. Sack 'em and bag 'em. Sack 'em and bag 'em. You got to get to the quarterback. This has gone on for too far and too long. All right? You got too much talent on this defense for you to not be going and getting after quarterbacks. A minimum of 40 sacks is necessary for this Detroit Lions team for them to be successful on the defensive side of the football. A minimum of 40. Baseline 40 sacks. You should be doing that in your sleep with the amount of talent you got along that defensive line, but you're not. And I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know why you're not doing that. Figure it out. I want Terrell Austin to come in, devise a scheme where guys are getting opportunities to win one-on-one matchups, where guys are coming scot-free off of blitzes and being a little bit more disruptive against opposing offenses. Getting after the quarterback, forcing the issue, and seeing if you can force some more turnovers. Sack them and bag them. And look, if Ndamukong Suh has to ragdoll a couple of guys, pick them up and slam them, so be it. But there needs to be a level of fear when you're playing the Detroit Lions. And not just because you think Ndamukong Suh's going to step on your fingers or kick you in your groins or something like that. I'm talking like intimidation factor. Like, man, these guys are tough. And they hit quarterbacks. They hurt quarterbacks. I'm talking about that kind of intimidation. So, sack them, bag them, tag them, get to the quarterback. Clean up the mess. And I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. There was a misconception, a common one, and I'm not going to lie, I was one of the ones perpetuating that this Lions team was out of control. And until you got a new man in here as your head coach, it was going to continue to run amok. And even though the penalties said something totally different, the turnovers, the inconsistencies, and some of the penalties were untimely. It seemed like they got penalties in bunches, that they imploded all at the same time. And there was something to be said about this team and their inability to get it done in the crunch when they needed to. Go see that Ravens game last year at home. I mean, you imploded last season at the end of the year. You had this division right where you wanted it. What more could you ask for? No Jay Cutler, no Aaron Rodgers, and you still couldn't win the damn division. If that doesn't warrant Jim Schwartz getting fired, then I don't know what else does. And so the turnovers, the inability to be consistent, all of these things were messes in Detroit. clean them up. Jim Caldwell is now your new head coach. Clean the messes up. You're gonna hear me roar. Now, I hope you don't sound like that because you're not scaring anybody sounding like Katy Perry. Now, you need to sound more like, you're gonna hear me roar. That's more along the lines of what you're trying to hear. But all in all, you've got to be more ferocious as a football team. Teams need to be uneasy about coming to Ford Field. Teams need to be uneasy about lining up against your defense. You need to be more explosive offensively. Teams need to be up at night thinking about how they're going to stop your offense. As a whole, this team just needs to be more ferocious on both sides of the football. Be able to run it, throw it, go after teams' quarterbacks, force turnovers. Just be better all around, because in this division, you've got to be able to score with the big boys, and you got to be able to get timely defensive stops if you're going to be able to win in this division. So you go to the independent variable, Matthew Stafford. And I think a lot of the onus and pressure has been put on him, and rightfully so. I mean, he's your big, high-priced quarterback. He's the leader of this football team. And this team is only going to go as far as he takes them. There's no reason for 20 interceptions, and he had 19 last year. No reason to be up around there. I mean, yeah, I know you guys throw it a heck of a lot, but it's all about smart decisions and not being so loose with the football. It's all about making the smart decisions. And sometimes Matthew Stafford, he struggles with decision making, and he struggles with, I'm trying to find a word, and it's one word that I'm trying to think of. Restraint. That's the word I'm looking for. He struggles with the ability to turn down an enticing throw. Yes, we know you have a strong arm and you can laser some balls in there with these little sidearm throws. Sometimes you just got to know when to check it down or when to chuck it out of bounds. Or just throw it up to Calvin Johnson. But there's times where you just got to leave it alone. You know, you see a guy running across the field. He looks open, but there's a linebacker sitting there waiting for you to make a mistake, and there's a guy trailing on the play. You see the linebacker, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you still feel like you can zip it in there before anybody can touch it. Those are the ones you just need to leave it alone. Because a lot of times you end up throwing the ball right to that linebacker, and they ended up taking it to the house. You got to be smart. You know, pick your spots. Don't try to force the football. Use more restraint. I think that's the big issue with him, is limit the turnovers. You need to excel at spreading the ball around. Look, Calvin's going to get his. We know that. So you don't even have to worry about that. Get Golden Tate involved. Whomever is in that slot, get them the football. Ebron, Pettigrew, Fourier, tight ends, everywhere. Get them the football. Spread the wealth. Don't be a quarterback that feels the need to force the football to one guy, and that being Calvin Johnson, and get yourself in trouble. There's too many weapons on this team. Spread it around. Bring those turnover numbers down. Sacks and turnovers are your dependent variable, and if Matthew Stafford and this offense can score a boatload of points, take the lead, and give the defense a definitive opportunity to rush the passer, maybe the sack totals will go up. And if the sack totals go up, then the turnover numbers will go up. They go hand in hand. I talk about it all the time. It's no different here. This team needs to be better at getting to the other team's quarterback. And an easy way to help them is to score points, put them in the lead, and force teams to take to the air so that this defense can pin their ears back and go after the quarterback. Constant. I got to say it one more time. One more time. Heavens to Megatron. He's the constant on this team. No matter what's going on in Detroit, whether Matthew Stafford is injured or he's healthy or this team is really good or they're really bad, doesn't matter. He's the constant. What was it, 2 years ago where you guys were terrible? He was on a quest for 2,000 yards receiving to be the first receiver to do that, and he came dangerously close to doing it. You guys were terrible that year. Was it? I mean, you weren't even worth watching that year. He made you worth watching. So he's the constant. If you know nothing else about the Detroit Lions, you know Calvin Johnson and what he brings to the football field each and every Sunday that he steps on the field. And so he's the constant right now in Detroit. Conclusion. What does this all mean for the Detroit Lions? I look at this team and I feel like there is potential. There's two things and really three things that worry me with this team, with this schedule in 2014. Hear me out. One, I need you to beat the big boys in your division. You need to beat Green Bay. You need to beat Chicago. And I'm not just talking about at home at Ford Field. You need to find a way to beat these teams on the road as well. Green Bay owns you when Aaron Rodgers plays. When Aaron Rodgers plays, you can't beat them at home or in Green Bay. Chicago is a team that you struggle with home or away, but you can beat them. You've beaten them in the past. I need you to do that again, and I need you to find a way to go and get one of those games, Green Bay or Chicago. I need one of those on the road. You don't have to get both of them. I just need one of them. You need to sweep one of those teams. I don't think that's going to be the Packers because you can't beat Green Bay in Green Bay to save your life. So I tell you, the easier one would be Chicago. Good luck with that. You can't lose to Minnesota. If you do, it can only be once. You need to go 4-2 in this division. That's number one. Number two, you've got a lot of tough road games, man. This is rough. You've got Carolina on the road. Like, I don't want to throw the Jets in here, but they play defense. They play defense, man. They start getting after your quarterback, hit you in the mouth a couple of times. Ask New Orleans last year. You can be had on the road against the Jets. You got them on the road. You got Arizona on the road. To me, after New Orleans and Seattle, that's the toughest place to play in the National Football League. You got to go to Arizona. You got the Patriots on the road. You got the Packers on the road. You got the Bears on the road. That's tough sledding on the road, man. That's tough on the road. You got to go to Atlanta. That's all 8 of your road games. All of them tough. Good luck. And last but not least, you got to win the games you're supposed to win. And I said all of that to say this. 6-10 is what I have you going this year. That's a tough road slate. You're going to lose in this division. You know, Minnesota going to jump up and bite you once, probably. Green Bay might get you twice. Chicago might get you twice. You might jump up and bite both of those teams once. Best case scenario is 4-2 in this division, I think, for you. Worst case scenario is that you go 1-5, 2-4. So I could easily see you faltering in this division. I could see you struggling on the road. And then you're going to have to clean up at home. And I just don't know. I don't know if you're good enough mentally yet to go on the road in some tough environments and get wins. 6-10. I can see you winning 8-9 games. If you step your game up, play well within the division, sneak a couple of those road games, I think you could beat Carolina on the road. I think you could beat the Jets. Why not? It's going to be tough going to Atlanta, to Arizona, New England, Green Bay, Chicago. But if you can get 1 or 2 of those outside of Carolina and the Jets, if you can get 2 of those, you got a shot to get to 9-10 wins. But this is a tough division. And in the NFC, you know how this conference is. This is a tough conference. This ain't the AFC. And this ain't the Powder Puff group. This the NFC. You got to win 10 just to be in a discussion to make it to the postseason. I don't know if you got that in you. 6-10 is what I got for you. So that's the Detroit Lions and their lab report. I thank you for joining me. That happens in the National Football League, the big or small. We cover it all here in the lab room. I thank you for joining me. Come back, join me tomorrow when we be breaking down the next team in this process, the Dirty Birds, the Atlanta Falcons. See you then. Have a good one. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.